Hey folks, how's it going? This is Mike. I'm back again to show you some more of my collection. And tonight I'm going to show you what I have on the Film Noir shelves. Um, these are all DVDs, no Blu-rays. And once again, this is not going to include what I have in the Criterion collection, and because they have a lot of film noir titles in that, and also the films that I classify with certain other actors or actresses. For example, Dirty Harry with Clint Eastwood. That's not in this collection. So I'm starting off with the box sets. The Warner Home Video box sets, which came out several years ago. You need to rush out and buy these if you don't have them. First set, 5 films out of the past, considered by a lot of people to be one of the absolute best of all time. Robert Mitchum, Jane Greer, Kirk Russell. Yeah, Kirk Russell. Kirk Douglas. Oh, God. I'm losing. It's very late at night. Okay, second one is Gun Crazy. Fantastic movie. Murder My Sweet. Dick Powell. The Setup. Robert Ryan. And The Asphalt Jungle. Sterling Hayden. Gene Hagen. Lewis Callahern. Marilyn Monroe in a very early film, very early role. Okay. And they put all the best ones in the very first set. Let me get these back inside here. I'll try not to make this go on way too long. The second box set, we have 5 more films. We have Crossfire with Robert Ryan and Robert Mitchum. We have Born to Kill with Lawrence Tierney and Claire Trevor. Lawrence Tierney was a good bad guy. Clash by Night. This is a Fritz Lang film from the early 1950s. Barbara Stanwyck, Paul Douglas, Robert Ryan, and Marilyn Monroe. And The Narrow Margin, a classic film. Charles McGraw and Marie Windsor. Really good one. And finally, a low-budget film. I think this was from Monogram Pictures. Lawrence Tierney again as John Dillinger. And I haven't yet watched that one. So that's something I need to do. All right. Let's see. Okay, Film Noir package number 3, and this time they were getting into thin packs for some reason, to save money, I guess. Robert Mitchum and Jane Russell, His Kind of Woman. The Racket with Robert Mitchum, Elizabeth Scott, and Robert Ryan. A lot of the same cast of characters. Border Incident. This is, let's see, who is in this one? This is Ricardo Montalban and George Murphy. I'm not sure I've seen that one. This is a documentary about film noir called Bringing Darkness to the Light. I should never do this without my glasses on. Lady in the Lake. This is a really unusual one. Robert Montgomery, Audrey Totter. And here's a terrific movie, On Dangerous Ground, with Ida Lupino and Robert Ryan. Highly recommended. Okay. Put these back before they fall off the table. I'm going to try not to make this go on very long, folks. Number 4. All right. Now this one they started doing double features. So on the first one, I better put my glasses on for this one. First one, you have Active Violence with Van Heflin and Robert Ryan, coupled with Mystery Street with Ricardo Montalban and Sally Forrest. Then we have They Live by Night. This is a good one. They Live by Night. This is directed by Nicholas Ray. Kathy O'Donnell, Farley Granger. And the second feature is, again, Farley Granger and Kathy O'Donnell. This is Side Street. Edward G. Robinson in Illegal, which is an early film for Jane Mansfield. You can kind of see her there. And The Big Steal with Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer. And here are 2 great films, Where Danger Lives, Robert Mitchum, Faith Demergue, and Claude Rains, with Tension, which stars Richard Basehart, Audrey Totter, Sid Charisse, and Barry Sullivan, one of my absolute favorite film noirs of all time. Here we have Crime Wave with Sterling Hayden, Gene Nelson, Phyllis Kirk, Decoy with Gene Gilly and Edward Norris, kind of lesser-known stars. All right. So... great. That just fell on the floor. And I'm going to leave it there. Number 5, and here we get into even smaller packs, so I'll just read the titles here. We have Cornered, starring Dick Powell, something called Desperate, We have The Phoenix City Story, Dial 1119. Then we have Armored Car Robbery. Then we have Crime in the Streets, which of course is one of my favorite movies, John Cassavetes and Sal Mineo. Then we have Deadline at Dawn and Backfire. Okay, and then that's all for the Warner Home Video. I have a complete collection of those. This is a collection of films from Universal Studios, Dark Crimes, one of my favorite packages in my collection. This has 3 classic films. The Glass Key from 1942, starring Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. Phantom Lady from 1944, which is absolutely incredible. Then we have The Blue Dahlia, 1946, also Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. This next one is called, it's a compilation called Forgotten Noir. 3 DVDs in this one. Well, 3 packages. I guess it is 1 DVD. Yeah. There are 2 other collections under this title which I would like to get. These are really obscure films that even I don't know much about. I've watched a few of these. One is called Shadow Man with Cesar Romero, Shoot to Kill with Russell Wade and Susanna Walters. Who in the world were they? We're talking low-budget films here. Lone Shark with George Raft. I did see that one. That was a very good film. Coupled with Arson Incorporated, starring Robert Lowry and Ann Gwynn. Poverty Row type film. Then we have the Portland Exposé, and some, I don't know who was in that one. And They Were So Young, starring Scott Brady. Okay. I think a lot of these may not be considered noir films by a lot of scholars. The definition seems to be a little loose with a lot of people, so you just kind of use your own judgment sometimes. Key Largo, Bogart, Bacall, and Edward G. Robinson, and Claire Trevor. Also, Dark Passage, Bogart and Bacall. Fritz Lang movie, House by the River. Oh, this is a good one. Louis Hayward, Lee Bowman, and Jane Wyatt from Kino Video. Really a good film. The Lady from Shanghai, directed by Orson Welles, starring Orson Welles and his soon-to-be ex-wife, Rita Hayworth. Very unusual film. Gets better every time I see it. Robert Mitchum, Jane Russell, William Bendix, Macao. Here's Elizabeth Scott and Dan Duryea, Too Late for Tears. Very good movie. This one has nothing on the cover. That's because I bought this from one of those companies that makes bootlegs and DVD-Rs. Usually they take off television or a VHS tape. And the one inside of here, which you really can't see very well, this is a 1944 Universal film called Christmas Holiday, starring Deanna Durbin and Gene Kelly and Gail Sondergaard. A very strange film noir slash Deanna Durbin vehicle of the period, based on a story by W. Somerset Maugham. Very, very weird and downbeat story. Unusual for somebody like Deanna Durbin to make a film like that. Here's a low-budget film called Abandoned, starring Dennis O'Keefe and Gail Storm. Classic movie from 1962, Experiment in Terror, starring Glenn Ford, Lee Remick, and Ross Martin as the villain. And here's one of the best of all time, This Gun for Hire from 1942, Alan Ladd, Veronica Lake, Robert Preston. Alan Ladd was billed way down on the cast list, but he made such a hit in this that it made him a star overnight, even though he had been working in films for about 10 years, but he finally made it as a big star. Dick Powell and Elizabeth Scott in Pitfall. Elizabeth Scott was another sort of another Lauren Bacall. Yeah. T-Men, starring Dennis O'Keefe, also with June Lockhart and Charles McGraw. Now, here are 4 films starring Evan O'Brien. I put this in film noir because 3 of them are considered to be film noir. DOA, which is very famous. The Bigamist, directed by Ida Lupino. And The Hitchhiker. Or maybe The Hitchhiker was directed by... Well, maybe they both were. I'm not really sure. Sorry. But the other one was something called The Admiral Was a Lady, which obviously is not a film noir. But so I just put these in. What the heck? They're my shelves. I can do what I want. Here's a great, wonderful film from the 1950s. Robert Aldrich's Kiss Me Deadly, starring Ralph Meeker as Mike Hammer. And I'm always thinking about upgrading to the Criterion for that one, but I haven't done it yet. The Big Heat, Glenn Ford, Gloria Graham, and Lee Marvin. Chinatown from 1974, directed by Roman Polanski, Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway. This is a beautiful film, just a beautiful film to look at. Creepy story, but just very beautifully made, sort of like a loving tribute to everything noir. And of course, Sunset Boulevard, Gloria Swanson in her great comeback film, directed by Billy Wilder in 1950. Wonderful movie. Something in the 1950s a lot of people may not know about, The Garment Jungle. Okay. Here you go. Here's a classic for you, Double Indemnity. Barbara Stanwyck, Edward G. Robinson, and Fred MacMurray. Yeah. Elizabeth Scott again with Humphrey Bogart, Dead Reckoning. Here's another Robert Aldrich film, The Big Knife from 1955. This stars Jack Palance, Ida Lupino, Wendell Corey, Gene Hagen, Rod Steiger, and Shelley Winters. Very, very good movie. Also another downbeat movie. Speaking of downbeat, they don't get any more downbeat than The Big Combo from 1955. Cornell Wilde, Gene Wallace, who was his wife at the time, Richard Conte, Brian Donlevy, also Earl Holliman, and Lee Van Cleef. That's a very complicated couple of killers. James Cagney and Virginia Mayo in White Heat. Wow. Great, great movie. Here's something you might call neo-noir. Fairly recent. Clive Owen and I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. Very good film. Very violent, but it's certainly good. Here's DeForest Kelley way back in the 1940s when he was just starting out. He was under contract to Paramount, but he got loaned out for this film called Fear in the Night. Very interesting. I'd like to get a better print of this. This is from Alpha Video, and it's not the best imagery. John Garfield, Lana Turner, The Postman Always Rings Twice. Doesn't get any better than that, folks. Humphrey Bogart in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Wow, I love that movie. The Big Sleep, Bogart and Bacall. Okay? And I also have the first Bogart and Bacall film, To Have and Have Not, the one that made her a star overnight, which is not normally classified as a film noir, but since I have Bogart and Bacall together, I just keep it there. Here's one from Universal Studios in the 1940s. Burt Lancaster, Yvonne DiCarlo, and Dan Duryea, Crisscross. Very, very good film. Here is Edward G. Robinson and Joan Bennett in Fritz Lang's Scarlet Street, which is a great film, but unfortunately this is a terrible print. So I need to get one that's a hell of a lot better than this. All right. Dennis O'Keefe, Claire Trevor, Marcia Hunt in Raw Deal. And finally, in that stack, Barbara Stanwyck and Burt Lancaster in Sorry, Wrong Number. Wow. Great, great movie. Great performance by Barbara Stanwyck, who never gave a bad performance, by the way. Now I'm going to show you, just to get everything out of the way here. This is the Fox Film Noir series that came out a few years ago. There are 24 films in this series, and I will just show them to you, beginning with number 1. All right? So we have Laura, Gene Tierney, Dana Andrews, Clifton Webb, directed by Otto Preminger. Okay, let's see, where will I put these? Good luck, Mike. I need more room, folks. James Stewart and Richard Conte, called Northside 777. Panic in the Streets, directed by Elia Kazan. This stars Richard Widmark and Paul Douglas, and Jack Palance in a very early role. Here we have a 1950s film starring Robert Ryan. It's called House of Bamboo, which takes place in Tokyo. It's a color film, and this happens to be a remake of The Street with No Name, which came out in the 1940s. Mark Stevens, Richard Widmark, and Barbara Lawrence, Lloyd Nolan. Very interesting little movie. Then we have, oh, this is a great one, Tyrone Power in Nightmare Alley, co-starring Joan Blondell. Wow, this is a really good one, and a terrific performance by Tyrone Power. Totally out of his normal image of being the handsome hero who's always, you know, ends up on a good note. This is a very downbeat film. The House on 92nd Street, starring William Ith, Lloyd Nolan, Senior Hasso. And here we have, this is a good one, John Hodiak, Nancy Guild, Lloyd Nolan, Richard Conte, Somewhere in the Night. All right, now. followed by Gene Tierney in Whirlpool. Very good performance by Gene Tierney. Always good. Kiss of Death. Here we go. Starring Victor Mature, Brian Donlevy, Colleen Gray. Yeah, directed by Henry Hathaway. Very good movie. Let's see. Where the Sidewalk Ends. Dana Andrews and Gene Tierney. Directed by Otto Preminger. Same team that made Laura. And we have No Way Out from, I think, 1952. Early role for Sidney Poitier. Also Linda Darnell and Richard Widmark. Very, very powerful film. Oh, here's a good one. Fallen Angel. Top billed Alice Faye. Also Dana Andrews and Linda Darnell. Very, very good movie. Charles Bickford is in this as well. And was this directed by Otto Preminger? I'm not really sure. Yeah, it was. Otto Preminger. Okay. House on Telegraph Hill. This stars, let me see, who does this star? Richard Basehart, Valentina Cortesa, and William Lundigan. I'm not sure I've watched that one, to tell you the truth. Here we have Dana Andrews again in Boomerang, co-starring Jane Wyatt, Lee J. Cobb, directed by Elia Kazan. And finishing this up, this series, we have House of Strangers, starring Edward G. Robinson, Susan Hayward, Richard Conte, and Deborah Paget, directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz. Okay. Then we have Betty Grable, Victor Mature, Carol Landis, and Laird Crager in I Wake Up Screaming. Very good role for Betty Grable. Something a little bit different. And that was remade in the 1950s as Vicky, starring Gene Peters, Gene Crane, and Richard Boone. Very good movie. Okay, followed by Shock. Shock. Vincent Price and Lynn Barry. Very good mystery film. Lynn Barry is the evil girlfriend of all time. Okay. The Dark Corner, 1946. The stars Lucille Ball, Clifton Webb, William Bendix, and Mark Stevens. The Dark Corner. Nice change of pace for Lucille Ball. 14 Hours. Paul Douglas, Richard Basehart, Barbara Bel Geddes, an early role for Grace Kelly, and John Cassavetes is also in it. Very briefly. Let's see. Black Widow. This is a color film from the late 50s, starring Ginger Rogers, Van Heflin, Gene Tierney, George Raft, and Peggy Ann Garner. And this is the one that I would definitely question being a film noir, because it's more of a sort of a glamorous mystery. I don't know, but it's still kind of a fun film to watch just because all the people who were in it. Joan Crawford, Daisy Kenyon, co-starring Dana Andrews and Henry Fonda. Great cast of actors. Good role for Joan Crawford. Right. Then we have Dangerous Crossing, starring Gene Crane and Michael Rennie. Very good film. Then we have a film called Moontide, starring Jean Gabin and Ida Lupino. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm always mispronouncing French names. It might just be Jean Gabin. I really don't know, but very nice movie, very atmospheric. And the last in the series is Roadhouse, starring Ida Lupino, Cornell Wilde, Celeste Holm, and Richard Widmark. Very, very good film. Okay, let's hope those don't fall down. I have more to go. Hang on, folks. Hang on. I'll be right with you. Now, some of these I bought recently, and I don't see them listed in any of my film noir books, but this is Humphrey Bogart and Frederick March in Desperate Hours. This came out in 1955, and I believe it was had to be one of Bogart's final films, maybe the next to the last film. Very good performance by Bogart. He's like the older version of his young gangster self. So I guess this would be considered a noir flick by a lot of people. So, but I will call it that. Now, recently, Kino Lorber put out several films in their film noir series, which may or may not be considered. Well, for example, this is Robert Mitchum in something called Foreign Intrigue, which was a fairly enjoyable film, but I don't know if it was actually a noirish thriller, more like a spy thriller. But these are listed as film noir. This is Cover Up, starring William Bendix, Dennis O'Keefe, and Barbara Britton. And another one called The Crooked Way, starring John Payne. Pretty good little mystery. Here's something called The Killer is Loose, with Joseph Cotton, Rhonda Fleming, and Wendell Corey. And here's a very early entry to the film noir universe. This is The Beast of the City, early 1930s, 1931 or 1932, starring Walter Houston and Jean Harlow. Very early role for Jean Harlow. And I just watched this recently, and very, very good. And just totally fell in love with Jean Harlow. Another film you might call neo-noir. This is Stormy Monday, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Melanie Griffith, and Sting and Sean Bean. Okay, here's one I made a video about just a while ago. Henry Fonda and Sylvia Sidney in Fritz Lang's You Only Live Once, which is an absolute classic film from the 1930s. Here's a great movie with Barbara Stanwyck and Sterling Hayden called Crime with Passion from the 1950s. Very good role for both of those people. Here's a film that I bought from oldies.com, Alpha Video, which is in their Lost Film Noir Classic series. And I don't know anything about it, and I haven't read anything about it either, but it's called Close Up, with two people I never heard of, Alan Baxter and Virginia Gilmore. Anybody ever seen that? I haven't watched it yet. And finally, I have a few more here, and then I will be finished. From Universal Films, The Big Clock, starring Ray Milland, Charles Lawton, and Maureen O'Sullivan. Okay. The Chase, starring Robert Cummings, Peter Lorre, Michelle Morgan, and Steve Cochran. This is a really good one from Kino Video. And the all-time #1 classic, Detour, which is really one of my #1 films. From Universal, we have Black Angel, starring Dan Duryea, June Vincent, Peter Lorre, and Broderick Crawford. Very, very atmospheric film. Here's another new version of film noir, L.A. Confidential, with the defrocked Kevin Spacey, Kim Basinger, Russell Crowe. A really good film, extremely violent, but it certainly is a good film. Rita Hayworth and Gilda. Great, great film. Gene Tierney and Cornell Wilde in Leave Her to Heaven. Also Gene Crane, Vincent Price, Darrell Hickman. Marvelous film. And unusual to have a film noir in the 1940s in color. But very, very good movie. Classic, The Maltese Falcon. Bogart, Mary Astor, Peter Lorre. This package also contains the early Warner Brothers version of The Maltese Falcon, which came out in 1931, and the remake that came, well, sort of a remake that came out in 1936 with Bette Davis. It was called Satan Met a Lady, and it's absolutely terrible. Okay, here is Richard Basehart, Scott Brady in He Walked by Night, about a cop killer. Classic. Bogart and Gloria Graham in Nicholas Ray's In a Lonely Place. And I also have this on Criterion now. Orson Welles, Touch of Evil. It's a very, very worthwhile film to see. Lots of big stars. Charlton Heston, Janet Leigh. And finally, this is sort of a takeoff on the film noir series, Elliot Gould and The Long Goodbye. Okay? Which I only saw just recently. 23 minutes. Sorry it's so long, folks. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think.